Hi Year 12. Here is the second video on Stafford afternoons looking at stanzas 4, 5 and 6. So as kind of indicated by the end of the third stanza, the tone begins to shift here. It's arguable whether it's a volta. I think probably we could say that there's enough of a significant shift in the tone to say that a volta happens between these two stanzas. But I think that's something that would come down to whether you can argue the tone shift or not. So to me, there's a volta. Remember, volta is just when there's a shift in a poem, either tonally or structurally, that's significant. So volta happens here, and to me that's really cemented by this sentence. It's really short, the shortest one, the shortest full sentence in the poem. We've got some short fragments down here, but this is the shortest sentence. And the poetic voice says, "I knew it was dangerous." So just as a reminder, she's gone into the wood and the wood has gulped and swallowed her whole. And there's something in this sentence, to me it comes from the verb knew. I knew it was dangerous. That suggests to me that this voice, remember we're hearing the poem from the perspective of a young girl, that she is desperate to seem knowledgeable and mature. So this verb to me symbolises that desire for knowledge and for experience and expertise. So she doesn't want to appear naive or childish, rather she goes into the wood full of the knowledge that there was potential danger there. So the verb knew here, to me, is about her desire for expertise and knowledge. And remember, we've said that the poetic voice is kind of on that cusp between childhood and adulthood, and often that's something that signifies that shift, is the desire to seem more mature and to seem more adult. So I think that is definitely part of the poetic voice here. I knew it was dangerous. And then we get some interesting personification, a little bit like up here, of the wood. The way the trees drew sly faces from light and shade, the wood let out its sticky breath on the back of my neck, and flowering nettles gathered spit in their throats. So there's a couple of images we could pick up here. I really like this last one, the idea of flowering nettles gathering spit in their throats. And I think I would reduce it down even just to the beginning, the flowering nettles. So that noun phrase, I think, says quite a lot, because if we think about nettles, we think of them as being something painful and something that can hurt you. So therefore something that you should avoid. Yet they've flowered. And the flowering, other than being a natural part of the way that plant might develop, suggests metaphorically to me that the nettles are trying to tempt people towards them. Look at me, I'm pretty, I'm a flower, I'm not dangerous. And then you get too close and you were stung. So to me there's a metaphor here for the danger. Remember we said earlier on that all the time we're talking about nature, literal nature like the wood or the nettles. We're also talking metaphorically about human nature. There's something in human nature in there, isn't there, about being deceitful and convincing somebody. Think about that predatory male figure, kind of luring somebody in, pretending to be one thing, pretending to be this pretty flower, but underneath being this dangerous and potentially painful nettle. So to me, there's a metaphor of deceit in human nature. Some kind of entrapment is happening to the poetic voice through nature, but also in human nature. And I would like you to think about this part of the personification, the trees drawing sly faces why sly? The personification of trees is something that's quite common in literature, it appears quite a lot, but why are the faces sly? And perhaps extend that question, why from light and shade? I'll also just look briefly at this middle part here. The wood let out its sticky breath on the back of my neck. So I'm going to leave this sticky breath bit, but I'm going to think about it on the back of my neck. So this prepositional phrase. Why is it important that it's on the back of her neck? Well, it's something that's attaching to her. The sticky breath of the wood is sticking on to her. So she is metaphorically being changed by this experience in the wood. It's something that she's not going to be able to escape from unaltered. She's going to come out with this stickiness on the back of her neck. So that to me just emphasises, because it could just be let out its sticky breath, but the prepositional phrase of on the back of my neck to me really cements the idea that this experience is going to change her. It's going to be an important part of growing up, something she remembers for a long time. So this to me says this is something that's going to alter her. It's permanent, so she won't be able to leave without it. And then we move on to I guess the climax of the poem. So in stanza 5, we've got too late. Touch, said the long-haired man who stood legs apart by a silver birch with a living purple root in his hand. And then we'll just stop there. So the kind of metaphor of the wood and nature being about human nature is really made quite clear here, because what happens to the girl is someone flashes her. So the living purple root is his penis. So by using the metaphor of a living purple root, I think we're reminded of the childish part of this poetic voice. Remember, I think we've spoken before about, yeah, we did. Remember when we did Not for Parents, we talked a little bit about how simile is often used, or metaphor often used, either when describing something to a child or in a child's voice, because it's that technique is partly about taking something perhaps unfamiliar or confusing and comparing it to something you do know. So clearly to this young child, the image of this guy's penis is unfamiliar. So the contrast of it to something she would understand, like a vegetable, helps us, I think, see the sense of naivety and innocence in the voice. So this metaphor to me tells us of the innocence of the poetic voice. And I also want to think about this opening fragment, too late. So similar to the opening of the stanza above, we have this kind of short line which suggests perhaps something is happening in terms of the pace of the poem. We're working up to this climax, and that is further shortened by contracting right down to a fragment. So structurally, where am I going to write this? Down here. So structurally, kind of a structural climax with this fragment. And again, I think it works figuratively as well. So it's too late in the sense that she's walked too far and she's seen this man and she can't go back. But it's also too late in the sense that she has gone on this journey towards adulthood and she can't ever go back from it now. A little bit like the sticky breath being stuck on the back of her neck. She can't unsee what she's seen. It's going to have an effect on the way she views men and the way that she views sexuality. So it's too late in a sense of her journey, literally, but also her journey into adulthood. And I think I want to double down on the sense of innocence and vulnerability here, because it's too late and it's not her fault that it's too late. This person has exposed himself to her, taking away her ability to make those discoveries for herself on her own terms with her own partner. So to me, there is a real vulnerability and a pity that we feel for the poetic voice. So the vulnerability of the poetic voice and then the pity we feel for the voice, because, like I say, it wasn't her choice to be flashed at. And then just to continue on the next phrase, the sight made sound rush back, because remember up here, sound was seeming to dwindle and to disappear. Birds a distant lawnmower, his hoarse, frightful endearments as I backed away, then ran all the way home. Into a game where children scattered and shrieked and time fell from the sky like a red ball. So the final thing I'm going to get you to feed back to me on is the significance of the sound coming back. So why do you think this experience has brought back the sound that was kind of going into the distance earlier on? And I'm going to explore this image here. She runs back home, so there's obviously a metaphorical kind of desperation to get back to safety here. But she comes into a game where the children scattered and shrieked. Now, I'm quite intrigued by these verbs. Why would the children scatter? The shrieking could just be the shrieking of a child in a game, but scattering to me suggests that the poetic voice feels that she's still isolated from children, perhaps even more isolated now, that something that has happened on this journey has made her different to the other children. Maybe she feels that they can sense that. The scattering to me is significant, probably more so than the shrieking. So I think here we've got the isolation that she explored at the top, the isolation that she was interested in, that she wanted, because the isolation represented freedom. But here, I think it's unwanted isolation. Because she went into the game, she wanted to be part of the game, but the other children scattered away from her. So I think it's unwanted isolation, and I think that's due to the fact that she has been changed. And then I'm going to end on this final image. So into a game where children scattered and shrieked and time fell from the sky like a red ball. Now we talked quite a lot at the beginning about the importance of time. We talked about the importance of time stopping. So in that opening line it says the afternoons could suddenly pause, and we talked about that kind of time being quite elastic and drawing out during moments of boredom where you feel like the time just won't move on. But here time seems to have accelerated. It fell from the sky, but it fell like a red ball. So that simile on the one hand suggests time is speeding up. She's kind of come back into the present and away from the reverie of this experience. Why is it like a red ball? So again, to me that could say two things. A red ball is a kind of stereotypical, I suppose, a ball of any colour, but like a stereotypical image of childhood, isn't it? You're innocent and young and you're playing with a ball. So it's a return to childhood. she's wandered into the wood in search of experience and adulthood and has returned. And she's rushed back, she's frightened, and she's returned to childhood. So that simile of the sky being the sun in the sky being like a red ball could be the return to childhood, or the desire to return to childhood. We've said that we think that won't be possible because this experience is going to stick to her, but she wants to return to a childhood experience. But then I'm going to end on the kind of exploration of something a bit more sinister. So the sun being red, it's not often the colour it is it? You have some kind of red tones in the sun at certain times of the year, but that spells danger to me. The symbolism of the colour red here is danger. And therefore foreshadowing onto the poetic voice's later life that this is something which will spell an unwanted and permanent change in the speaker's experience, that she can't simply return to childhood. Everything has changed, and the sun in the sky is even reflecting that, because it is glowing this dangerous dark colour. So the symbolism of red suggesting danger, but also foreshadowing the change in the poetic voice. Okay, Year 12, that is my interpretation of Stafford Afternoons. I hope it was helpful.